The story began with the gangster Kang inside his car. His driver, with a tone of concern, remarked that, by the way, if really had to go. Kang, with disappointment, replied that those were the boss orders. With an air of complicity, the driver nodded and exclaimed that this was what he had always said, that this time no one could call him unreasonable. Kang, for his part, declared that the plan to do whatever the boss wanted, even if it meant undergoing pepper reduction surgery. At the hospital, Kang, while being observed, thought that this was a place where more ordinary people came than one might imagine. He realized he had been scared for no reason. The people present whispered among themselves, wondering if he was a gangster. Kang repeated to himself in his mind that he had to keep his composure. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Mr. Kang Yujeon, Mr. Kang Yujeon." It was a nurse who, not seeing an immediate response, wondered where he had gone. Then, the nurse looked directly at him and asked if he was Mr. Kang. He affirmed with a simple yes, "My name is Kang Yujeon." The nurse, visibly nervous upon seeing him, offered to guide him. Kang, internally, was surprised that after so long, someone had called him by his real name. Upon arriving at the consultation room, the nurse indicated that he could enter. Once inside, Kang was greeted by Dr. Min-hae, who asked if he was Mr. Kang. Kang nodded yes, and the doctor kindly invited him to take a seat. Immediately, Kang couldn't help but think that his first impression had been correct. The doctor was extremely handsome, and he secretly wished he would remove his mask to get a better look at his face. Distracted by his thoughts, he barely reacted when the doctor called his name again. Kang, somewhat embarrassed, realized he had been staring intently and admitted it out loud. Min-hae, in disbelief, asked him if he was crazy. Fast with Kang's confusion, the doctor abruptly shifted to the treatment details, mentioning the observed pepper reduction surgery and asking if this was some form of depression. Kang, growing increasingly bewildered, could only manage to ask what was happening. Min-hae explained, in a tone both exasperated and amused, that while he had heard of people wanting such procedures, this was the first time he had encountered someone requesting such a ridiculous surgery. Without further ado, he ordered Kang to remove his underwear. Kang, taken aback, complied with a hesitant yes. Meanwhile, Dr. Min-hae thought to himself that men who talked like this usually weren't much to look at anyway. In an attempt to defend his dignity, Kang proudly declared that his pepper was, in fact, quite substantial. Min-hae mentally concluded that throughout his entire medical career, he had never witnessed anything so absurd. Finally, looking at Kang with a mix of professionalism and bewilderment, he exclaimed, well, what do we have here, Mr. Kang? The truth is, Kang is thin blood because his pepper is large, wink wink. Min-hae turned to Kang Yujeon enthusiastically and asked if he had any tattoos. Kang, thoughtful, admitted that he did, though he couldn't help feeling slightly uncomfortable with how close the doctor's face was, wondering if this was how he treated all his patients. And fast, Min-hae spoke again, asking Kang Yujeon if he could say something crazy from that moment on. He confessed it was the first time in his life he had seen something so marvelous and, in a tone both playful and sincere, questioned whether Kang was sure about going through with the surgery, because no matter how he looked at it, reducing something so perfect seemed like a sin. Kang, firm in his decision, replied that he still had to get the surgery. Min-hae, resigned, said it was a sham and apologized. Noticing a hint of sadness in the doctor, Kang asked if he was upset. Instead of answering directly, Min-hae changed the subject, asking casually if Kang worked with his fists. Kang confirmed that he did and expressed concern, asking if his hope would interfere with his ability to undergo the surgery. Min-hae's reaction was one of absolute astonishment. He exclaimed, "Is that really possible?" and immediately asked when Kang wanted to schedule the surgery. Kang replied that he'd like it as soon as possible. With a mischievous smile, Min-hae suggested that very night. Kang, somewhat surprised, confirmed whether he meant that same day. Min-hae, with complete confidence, nodded and said he had already reserved everything for the surgery, asking if 9 de la noche was acceptable. Kang agreed with a simple yes. Before seeing him out, Min-hae asked a more personal question, "Do you have a girlfriend?" Kang answered that he did not. Still smiling, Min-hae then escorted him out of the office, energetically reminding him of their appointment at 9 that night and warning him not to forget. "See you tonight, Mr. Kang Yujeon," were his final words before closing the door. Well, we all know what is going to happen, but let's continue anyway. Upon arriving at the clinic again, Kang Hoo-yeon couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt, wondering if it was strange that he was there and whether he was sure the appointment was really at 9 at night. Min-hae greeted him immediately, announcing his presence with an enthusiastic, "Is here, Mr. Kang Hoo-yeon." Kang confirmed his arrival but then expressed confusion at seeing the place empty, asking why no one else was there. Min-hae explained matter-of-factly that the nurses had been told to leave early, adding with full confidence that they could perform the surgery alone. It then invited Kang in, lightly suggesting that if he had changed his mind, there was still time. Kang, determined, simply said no, though he admitted to himself that he was nervous. With a syringe in hand, Min-hae approached and announced that he was going to administer the anesthesia. As the injection took effect, Kang began to feel drowsy, mumbling a few final words of protest directed at the doctor before falling completely asleep. When he woke up, the first thing he saw was an unfamiliar ceiling, an image he repeated to himself in disbelief, before noticing someone gently tapping his face to wake him. Min-hae, with evident concern, asked if he was okay. Kang, now more alert, noticed that the doctor was sweating profusely and returned the question, showing his own unease. Min-hae admitted with a sigh of relief that the scale of the surgery had been larger than he anticipated, but nevertheless, it had ended very well. At that moment, Kang decided to check the results and, seeing that not much seemed to have changed, expressed his confusion aloud. Min-hae reacted with an exclamation of surprise, urging him to look at the image displayed on the screen. He enthusiastically explained that if the original size had been as large as what they were seeing, it meant it had been reduced to 1.1 centimeters. He added that it looked big on the screen, but in reality, the difference was very subtle, which was why it didn't look like idiot surgery. Kang, for his part, couldn't help wondering when Min-hae had found the time to prepare something like this. Complaining that it hurt a little, Kang was reassured by Min-hae that the pain wouldn't last long. The doctor recommended a return the next day to check on his progress, an instruction Kang met with a confirming question. Min-hae insisted that he had to come back for several days and suggested it would be better if he came at night, like this time. Internally, Min-hae wondered whether asking him to come at 9 de la noche on a weekday was too much, or if 7:30 might be better. Before he could suggest a time, Kang spoke up and said decisively, 9. Surprised by the immediate agreement, Min-hae could only repeat his name with a mix of amazement and curiosity. Kang confirmed it, simply stating that the next day he would also come at 9 de la noche. 4 days later, Kang found himself waking up once again under a ceiling he had grown used to. Min-hae was beside him, persistently calling his name to bring him around, his voice full of characteristic energy. As Kang opened his eyes, he noticed with a sense of familiarity that the doctor was there again, right by his side to wake him. Without a word, Min-hae offered him a cup of coffee. Kang apologetically stated that he didn't like coffee, but after a brief moment of hesitation, he ended up drinking it anyway. As he did, he couldn't help thinking how peculiar this doctor was. While everyone else avoided him, Min-hae always treated him kindly, which led Kang to wonder, with a hint of disbelief, whether he might not be afraid of him. It was then that Min-hae, with an air of curiosity, mentioned he had found something interesting in Kang Hoo-yeon's pants. Kang recalled internally the moment someone had given him that object with blind fight, wondering what use it could be, but since the pain had been less than expected, it had actually proven effective. Min-hae, holding the object, commented that it looked like a talisman and asked what kind it was. Kang simply explained that it was a pain reduction talisman, but then, unable to contain his own curiosity, he asked the doctor why he was interested. Min-hae chuckled softly, repeating the phrase pain reduction with a tone of amused disbelief, as if the idea of a gangster using such a talisman struck him as humorously contradictory. Finally, Kang decided to ask the question that had been on his mind directly, asking Min-hae if he wasn't afraid of him. The doctor responded with another question, wondering if there was any specific reason he should be afraid of Mr. Kang Hoo-yeon. Kang argued that usually people were scared just seeing his face. Min-hae, with disarming frankness, assured him that while it might be a face that could scare people, it didn't affect him because he was already used to it. He even added, with a touch of lightness, that among gangsters, Kang Hoo-yeon was quite handsome. Changing the topic naturally, Min-hae remarked that now that he talked about it, gangsters often used different names, and asked if that was the case for him too. Kang admitted that people called him Solge. Min-hae, considering it for a moment, said it suited him. However, Kang sincerely expressed that despite that, he wished the doctor would call him by his real name. After leaving the clinic, Kang settled into the back seat of the car, lost in thought. He reflected on what had happened, wondering if he really needed to go back the next day, though almost immediately, he resigned himself with an internal sigh, concluding that he probably would have to show up at the same time, as usual. Heavy, his driver, noticing his boss' unusual mood, couldn't contain his curiosity and cheerfully asked from the driver's seat if something good had happened. With full conviction, he added that, as expected, the talisman he had given him had worked perfectly. Kang gently interrupted Heavy's enthusiasm, asking him to focus only on driving. He maintained his usual tone but with a firmness that left no room for further comments. Then, Kang fell asleep in the car and had a rather explicit dream. In the dream, he was with Dr. Min-hae, and literally introducing his third arm to the poor doctor, wink wink. Just then, Heavy gently woke him, announcing they had arrived at their destination. Kang, sitting up, immediately apologized for making his driver wait. Heavy replied that it was no problem, adding that he actually hoped Kang had been able to get some rest. Noticing his driver's expression, Kang couldn't help but curiously ask why he looked so nervous. Well, when Kang looked down, it was solid and hard as a rock, and we were not talking about geology. After some intense boxing, Kang tried to release his frustration, wondering what kind of dream area that left him so disturbed. Heavy, awakened by the noise, found him and asked in surprise what he was doing up at that hour. Kang urgently declared that he needed to see the doctor immediately. Heavy, alarmed, asked if he'd been attacked and worriedly suggested maybe he should go to a hospital other than the cosmetic surgery department. Kang, however, just ordered him to get ready quickly. Heavy, still confused, pointed out that it was too early in the morning for a medical visit. Finally, at 9 o'clock the next night, Kang found himself reading a letter addressed to him. In it, the sender, Min-hae-hun, proclaimed that his assets were a special gift from God for the benefit of the world, and therefore should never, under any circumstances, be reduced. The strangely enthusiastic message ended by thanking him, because thanks to Kang, he had also eaten well. Furious and confused by the letter's content, Kang yelled, asking where that bastard Min-hae-hun was. Determined to get answers, he headed to a room where he encountered a nurse. The nurse calmly confirmed that the doctor would be at the clinic as always, right? Kang nodded with a simple yes. The nurse then added that he had heard from Hae-hun Min that Kang would come at that time, and that the doctor had asked him to give Kang something. Upon hearing the full name, Kang realized the doctor's name was Hae-hun Min. When he received a second letter, Kang couldn't help but comment ironically on how old-fashioned it was to receive one these days. Reading it aloud, he found the same extravagant message, that his paper was a special gift from God to bless the world and that he should never, ever think about reducing its size, ending once again with a thanks to you, ate well. Completely exasperated, Kang exclaimed that it meant the surgery had never actually happened, cursing that stupid guy named Min-hae. The nurse, nervous and wanting to distance himself from any responsibility, shouted that he knew absolutely nothing. In Kang's office, an employee timidly requested a month of vacation. Kang, absorbed in his own thoughts about having to find some bastard who had mistaken his identity, barely processed the request and distractedly asked what was going on. Meanwhile, at the onsen center, Min-hae was having a conversation with his acquaintance Hei Griegao. Skeptically, Min-hae asked Hei Griegao if he was sure about some girl found cute. Hei Griegao, suddenly remembering his friend's peculiar tasks, joked that Min-hae was the type to get excited about another man's paper, adding that no matter how handsome someone was or how round their backside, it wasn't his type. Annoyed, Min-hae reminded him that he had already said he wasn't interested in anyone with a small paper. To change the subject, Min-hae showed his fist to Hei Griegao and asked with an air of superiority if he had ever seen anything that big. Hei Griegao, incredulous, questioned whether something that size could even belong to a woman. Min-hae confidently affirmed that he had seen it with his own eyes, though internally he felt a tinge of melancholy, thinking he might never see it again. Hei Griegao took the joke further, asking if that guy was even human, since even a horse's pepper would be smaller than Min-hae's forearm. Exasperated, Min-hae retorted that he shouldn't have to explain, stating it was the first time he had seen something like that though. Suddenly, Hei Griegao noticed something and urgently told Min-hae to stay still. When Minhai asked what was wrong, Hei Liegao whispered that the person entering was young Tae King, 58 years old, a pillar of that cafe. Confused, Minhai wanted to know what he had done and why he was showing up. Was he just passing by? Hei Liegao, nervous, warned that if they kept staring like that, they would look suspicious. Instead of staying, Minhai fled the scene. Hei Liegao followed him, asking where he was going and if he was angry. Minhai denied it. Hei Liegao, trying to be reasonable, said how could they know just by looking, they hadn't seen each other in 20 years, and instead of behaving like this, it would be better to go back and observe him properly. Minhai flatly refused. Hei Liegao insisted, telling him not to be like that and to go back inside. Minhai, seeing through his friend's true intention, accused him of saying all that because of the cafe employee. Hei Liegao, trying to deny it, launched into a speech about how for 10 years he had been by Minhai's side, watching him suffer while searching for his father, whose face he barely remembered, and that he did it because he felt sorry for him. He argued that a person couldn't get a job with skills alone and mentioned that he had heard Minhai's university superiors had asked to work together, suggesting that since he had come this far, maybe it was better to let go of his search. Bitterly, Minhai shot back that Hei Liegao should have found him earlier. Hei Liegao, exasperated, exclaimed that his personality was horrible. Minhai exploded, asking if only now he thought it was horrible, yelling that they couldn't even be sure if it was true, and grumbling that that bastard only took advantage of him because they had been middle school classmates. Hei Liegao tried to calm things down with a hey, but Minhai, still upset, shouted what he wanted now. Did he really want to be scammed? Hei Liegao, completely shifting his tone, extended his hand and very calmly asked for his consultation fee, promising to use it well and that he would call when he found a good candidate to be Minhai's staff. Minhai thought to himself that continuing to spend money like this was a crime he ought to report to the police. However, Hei Liegao launched into another sentimental speech, reminding him of his 10-year search and unconditional support. With a resigned sigh, Minhai reflected that he never thought he'd hear that from young Hei Liegao, and decided he had to stop overthinking things. After leaving a small restaurant where he had gone to grab a bite, the owner bid Minhai farewell with a friendly thank you, come again soon. Walking out into the street, Minhai couldn't help but reflect on how expensive it was to find someone, just as Jeon had told him, and how difficult it would be to secure a stable job until he located his father. With a resigned sigh, he thought he'd probably have to go back to working double shifts as a doctor. His mind then drifted back to Kang Huyeon, wishing that if they ever met again, Kang would call him by his real name. Melancholy, he acknowledged that he would never find someone like Kang Huyeon again, and that everything would have been perfect if he hadn't been a gangster. He recalled the letter he wrote with a tinge of regret, wondering if maybe he shouldn't have added that note at the end. Now, if Kang ever caught him, he was sure Kang would kill him. Trying to calm himself, he reasoned, no matter how badly he had treated a gangster, would he really come all the way from Seoul to Hangang? It was a 3-hour drive at minimum. He decided he was worrying over nothing and that the best thing would be to go back to the hotel and drink some soju. But at that very moment, he spotted a terribly familiar figure. In disbelief and a bit of panic, he stammered, "MMR, Huyeon Kang." It was him. Kang greeted him with a dry "Oh, sir." Stand, Minhai exclaimed that he had actually come and, trying to regain his composure, formally asked how he had been, if he'd been keeping well. Kang, visibly angry, responded sarcastically, asking how he thought he'd been. Extremely nervous, Minhai tried to defuse the situation by suggesting they go inside somewhere and clumsily asked if he liked soju. He pleaded that although he knew he was wrong, they could talk it over. However, Kang was not in the mood for conversation. In one swift and forceful move, he grabbed Minhai by the head and slammed him to the ground. Despite the impact and the blood starting to stream from his head, Minhai's mind, always fascinated by physiques, couldn't help but register an absurd thought amid the chaos. Even with his head bleeding, Kang looked perfectly muscular. Wow, this Minhai, even in the most serious situations, he always says something perverted. Kang's face darkened with a mix of anger and profound discomfort as he interrogated Minhai, his voice making it clear just how furious he was. He demanded to know how many times Minhai had done it, insisting on an answer. Minhai, still dazed and confused from the sudden attack and the question, could only stammer a hesitant, what, not fully grasping the accusation. Kang's patience had run out. In a sharper, more direct tone, he clarified his question, bluntly asking how many times Min had taken his pepper, repeating the very act that had disturbed him so deeply.